You are good to go.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for any background noise. The virtual world doesn't account for children playing outside, and my neighbors are out in full force. My name is Maya Hazel. I am the Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion, and I'm so excited to be presenting today on a topic near and dear to my heart, and that's interview skills, particularly with the gloss of virtual interviews, which is the wave of the future, given our current state of affairs. So let's get started.
Maya, go ahead and click on the PowerPoint. Yep, there you go.
So let's talk about how is this different. Virtual interviews are amazing, in my opinion, particularly as a diversity professional, because it's giving us an opportunity to expand opportunities to interview. We know that we have on-campus interview as our main mechanism, for example, for firm and some government agency hiring, and there's a limited number of students that we can see in that way. A lot of schools have lottery systems. Sometimes you don't get the firms or employers that you're really interested in. And I think the fact that there are just kind of predetermined cuts that a lot of firms observe in terms of grades, GPA, can be a barrier. So I really see video interviews and direct video applications as a new entry point. We at White & Case have instituted a new virtual interviewing platform called Launchpad, and we are excited to roll it out this year. It is an addition to the traditional OCI method of interviews, and as I said, it's going to allow us engagement with a broader group of students across the U.S. So really, really excited about that. I think that these will provide an opportunity for you to show us who you are while bringing your written application to life. So in addition to on-campus interviews, you can do resume drops where you can just, also just emailing the firm or mailing the firm their standard cover letter and resume. But the opportunity to also add a video to your application only amplifies your chances of being seen by a firm. So that's how this is different. But in so many ways, this is the same. The goal is to simulate a traditional on-campus interview. So you really should be treating this like any other face-to-face interview. And I'm going to go in depth about what that entails. But being professional at all times, making sure you're in a quiet area and can be heard, relaxing and just being yourself. We want to get to know you and the skills and experience you can bring to make your mark at White & Case. And that is the same view of any employer who's interviewing you for an opportunity. So just to quickly get you comfortable with Launchpad as the platform we're using, I used it myself, so I'm going to be speaking from experience. You would start by applying to us. You can upload a resume that can be scanned.
Could you try again?
And Siri wants to participate. 1 second, my apologies. You can upload a resume that will, our technology will basically decode your resume if you just upload it to our systems and pre-populate it into different application fields for you. Name, address, school, extracurricular activities, et cetera, or you can just kind of apply the old-fashioned way. So then once you have uploaded that application, we will come back to you and say that your application, you've now been progressed to the video interview stage. And there isn't a filtering based on your application, except of course for the obvious things, are you in law school, et cetera. So we then will send a link for you to begin the interview process and give you information about if you need any help or any support. And in that vein, we help you to prepare. The system will help you set up your video and your microphone for the best recording quality, give you tips on how to make your video look clean and professional, and also allow you to answer a practice question and make sure that you're happy with it. So I want to stress that this is new. It's definitely new. It's a different medium, and some people have different levels of comfort at being in front of a camera. I think we're all experiencing that. A lot of us who are working virtually, learning virtually, having to be kind of staring at a camera and not really able to, see another human being face to face and have that interaction. So this is different. So I think some practice will definitely be necessary in just getting comfortable with the medium of being recorded. A lot of people don't like to be recorded at all. So to add that to the mix of the nervousness around any interview context where you're having to answer questions and you're hoping to do a really good job so that you're chosen for a job opportunity. So it is important to practice and get someone to help you so you can see kind of how you're coming off and how to set up the camera and what mode of practice would be helpful to you. For some people, it helps to put a piece of paper over the image of themselves so they're not looking at themselves while they're talking. For others, that makes it easier. Putting, a picture of an actual person in front of you and mimicking as if you were having the conversation, that may sound weird, but that may work for you. So, definitely decide and figure out what works for you. And once you get a sense of how the platform is going to be recording you, simulate that before you actually get on the platform to provide your video interview. Simulate that and practice until you get a bit more comfortable. So let's talk about the general goals for a successful interview. You want to instill confidence in your abilities and enthusiasm for that specific employer. We will ask you, be specific. Why are you interested in White & Case? You want to be giving compelling and concise answers, particularly in the video application format, but not in the regular context of a 20, 30-minute screening interview. You'd have more time. In the video interview context, we're giving you 90 seconds to answer a specific question, and there'll be 5 specific questions that we'll be asking you. So being comfortable with giving concise, clear, compelling answers is important, and I'll talk a bit more about how do you craft those answers. You have to provide evidence of your potential and that you're worth a further look and further consideration. And people forget that any kind of mark you make, any impression that you leave on someone who's already in the profession is a networking opportunity. They will potentially have a good view of you, get excited about you, and even if you don't wind up working for that employer and they don't choose you for a position, if you've left a strong impression, you can keep in touch and they might be willing to support you and help you later in your career. It's an opportunity to interact, connect in some way with lawyers who will then know you, connect with you. So what's so important? What's going to help you be good at any of this? Prepare, prepare, and prepare even more. There are some people who are just innately comfortable doing this, interviewing. I can chat up a tree and just keep a conversation going just with the tree and myself, right? Not everyone, but even if you are innately comfortable, it's really, really important to prepare, and I want to break down what I mean by prepare. 3 stages of preparation that are critical: employer research, resume assessment, and individual self-assessment. And I worry that a number of students don't spend enough time on the second and third level of preparation. I mentioned resume assessment and individual assessment, but more about that soon. Let's start with employer research. You need to gain as much knowledge as possible about the employer's different practice areas, particularly the areas of interest of those who will interview you if you are doing a live interview, but even over the kind of video virtual format. To the extent you get information about who will be interviewing you live, this obviously doesn't apply for just kind of the video application medium that I mentioned in the beginning. And then relevant legal industry news in practice areas of interest. If you can show that you are plugged in, that you are professionally mature and you're doing the thinking and learning about any practice areas that are already of interest, following what's happening in the legal press or the general press about that particular practice area will be very impressive. What are the sources of information? Employer's website, recruiting brochure, an overlooked source of information, recruitment professionals. Reach out to them, tell them about yourself, ask them questions about the firm, let them get to know you so they start making a bigger, broader connection and know how genuinely interested that you are. It's a way to stand out. Legal periodicals, articles profiling the employer and their practice areas, current trends in a particular legal practice or compliance area, and the profession generally. We want to hire people who are serious about their career, about the commitment, about what it's going to entail. So really doing that background research. It also, I think, just helps you to be more confident as you're going into these conversations with those who are already practicing and are well-versed. It just gives you another kind of body of knowledge beyond what you're learning in school that's going to distinguish you. Of course, third years who previously summered or interned with that employer who are at your school, who can give you that inside scoop. Similarly, alumni, what they found good about that particular organization that you're interested in. And then, of course, career services. I lived in career services when I was a law student. I ultimately, actually, while I was a law student, worked in career services. So I ultimately, just really saw the value, and then went on after practicing to be a head of career services at a law school. And I know what a critical role that office and those professionals in that office have, and really leverage them. Employer rankings, you may want to make a list of employers of interest. Think about what are kind of the feasible list of reach employers based on your connections or a specific experience you have, even if they're saying they typically may not take students who have your GPA. Consult with your resources or your network for information and contacts that you can reference during the interview process. That's a really great way of making yourself familiar to the particular employer. Like, oh, you're not a stranger to me. You know John or Sarah or Jillian, who also works at the firm, and you've already had a conversation with us. Any way that you can narrow or decrease that sense of unfamiliarity and no connection. Again, you're showing touch points and interest. When you're ranking employers, just things to think about in terms of priorities. I think as a law student, you don't have a sophisticated awareness, and all these firms look more alike than different, all these different employers. But things you might want to look to kind of understand for yourself what's important to you and what might most be of interest. Obviously, there areas of current or potential future interest in terms of their practice area, the location of domestic and international offices, business market reputation for future opportunities. So a lot of times you'll get the advice that I agree with. You should start in a big market and start with a larger employer who's going to give you perhaps a greater variety and sophistication of opportunities and access to a greater and variety of sophistication of clients. And then if you want to move to a smaller market or a smaller employer, you'll be better positioned. So thinking about that in your choice, particularly of first opportunities after law school, is important. And then cultural reputation. It's no use going to an organization where you're not going to thrive. So think about, do you have a size preference? Do you want to be in a huge firm with a lot of people? Would you prefer kind of a mid-size or a smaller employer? Looking at partner-associate leverage, that's going to be a big indicator of how much opportunity you get, particularly early in your career. So ask those questions. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't remark on diversity. So important to so many professionals today. You want to know, what's the environment going to be like? What type of people will I be working with? And for so many people across race, across all sorts of metrics of difference, being in a diverse environment is preferable and will put you at an advantage for a lot of reasons. Let's move to the second stage of preparation, and that is resume assessment. I love the litmus test for how well you know your resume, which is, can you recall and discuss anything mentioned on your resume for 2 minutes or 20 minutes? You never know what resume item you may need to draw from to answer questions that might be a focus of your interview, because you don't know what the interview questions are going to be. So the more you have to draw from, the more that you have in your arsenal, this toolbox of things that you can talk to articulately and substantively, really knowing your resume is critical. So in that resume assessment, review your resume carefully and refresh your memory regarding employment experiences, details of projects completed, any challenges overcome and lessons learned, how these shaped you and your legal career goals. Educational information. What did you accomplish as an organization leader? The content of your college thesis, your law review article, work product you created, edited, or otherwise provided assistance with, and any big recent developments on those topics that an interviewer would likely be aware of. So I had an example going into summer associate interviews. Someone saw something about product liability, a paper I'd written on product liability for a particular reason. And that was that person saying that was their specialty. I didn't even know that before I was going to be interviewing with them. So the fact that I kind of knew what was happening, what was going on, what was the most recent development since I had written that article quite a long time ago, hugely important and differentiated me, right? Made me seem like a good bet, a good investment for someone that, they don't know or know anything about. Also be prepared to address any challenges overcome. Grades, if you had a particular period where due to personal circumstances or other circumstances, your grades were not as strong, what would you say about that? Any limited prior legal or other work experience such that you may not be as aware or have the same leg up as someone who has done other kind of legal related internships. Well, what are the transferable skills that you gained and what makes you a strong person from the jobs that you did have from the non-legal space? And then resume gap, anything where you took time off or something that would be obvious from reviewing your resume. One thing that I recommend as a good practice is to draft answers to difficult questions and run them by a career counselor or a trusted peer. Basically, if you're comfortable with your answers to challenging questions, the employer will more likely be comfortable with your responses. So get comfortable with it. Another reason it's so important is to engage in a resume assessment, just kind of knowing your resume inside and out, because that's actually your source of evidence for answering competency-based behavioral interview questions, or what I'll refer to in short in this presentation as CBBI questions. Employers increasingly utilize CBBI techniques to do what are called behavioral interviews. So competencies are those behaviors, those skills or abilities that describe the expected performance in a position. So CBBI questions, competencies sought by legal employers. What are common competencies? You're intelligent and intellectually curious. You have strong analytical skills. You have strong oral and written communication skills. You have strong interpersonal skills such that, they can feel comfortable that you're going to be good dealing with a client. You're detail-oriented, responsible, entrepreneurial, ambitious. These are just kind of the common things, common competencies, behavior, skills, abilities that would be sought by a legal employer and any employer, quite frankly. When we look at competencies at White & Case, core competencies for us, intellectual and legal ability, tenacity and determination. Legal practice is not for the faint of heart at times, and then client readiness and maturity. What are some valuable distinguishing competencies? Teamwork, ability to show leadership, that you take initiative, that you have an entrepreneurial mindset, particularly as we are in a world of globalization and the sophistication of business and the world, the kind of acumen that you're going to bring to the table. A global mindset. White & Case is an incredibly global firm. We operate in so many regions of the world. So having a global mindset and understanding and appreciation is important to us. That is particularly valuable and will distinguish you with us. So in a competency-based behavioral interview, rather than asking if you have a particular competency, the interviewer will ask you to provide an example of a time you demonstrated the competency. Why? The best predictor of future performance or behavior is your past performance or behavior. So let's just go into some detail, just some examples to help get a feel for this. What are some examples of behavioral interview questions if the competency is analytical ability and intelligence? Tell me about a project or task that you were responsible for that best demonstrates your ability to analyze information. Give me an example of a time when you used your fact-finding skills to solve a problem. Tell me about the most difficult or complex idea, situation, or process you have ever had to explain to someone. How did you explain it? Were you successful? So you can see where knowing your own past, knowing what you've done is really, really important and you would need to draw from. For the competency of ambition or an action orientation, give me an example of a project where you came up with the idea and managed the process from start to finish. Describe a time when you took the initiative to do something that needed to be done, even though it wasn't your responsibility. What circumstances prompted you to act? Responsibility. Describe some projects or ideas, not necessarily your own, that were implemented or carried out successfully primarily because of your efforts. Tell me about a time you had developed trust, loyalty between you and a direct report or supervisor. What has been your most rewarding accomplishment? So in answering behavioral interview questions, we're looking for what we're going to term for short STAR answers. So behavioral interview questions are designed to elicit STAR responses. S for situation. What was the situation that the candidate was faced with, or what did he or she need to accomplish? What were the circumstances? Provide the context. Task. What task did the person need to accomplish to deal with the situation? Describe the challenge and expectations. What needed to be done and why? Action. What specifically did the candidate do to accomplish the task? How? What tools did the candidate use? Not the team around them, but the candidate themselves. And then finally, results. What was the outcome? Were the tasks accomplished? Did the action solve the situation with which the candidate was faced? What did the candidate learn from the experience? Did you get recognition? Can you quantify the accomplishment? Third level of preparation. In conjunction with your resume assessment, you must prepare for an interview by doing a deeper self-assessment. What are your 2 to 3 big selling points? These will help you answer competency-based behavioral interview questions and common open-ended questions like, tell me about yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? You need an articulate and succinct answer and a professional answer, one that has to do with something the employer would care about because it shows that you would be a good employee, that you would be a valuable member of the legal team. Another way to get at those sort of big picture questions is to come up with an elevator pitch. Those are your selling points. And remember, no employer is going to ask you, tell me, what are your two to three selling points? You know, you have to look for ways to provide them in your answers to as many interview questions as possible. So this is not the time to be modest, but do it in a way that is not off-putting. You need to be selling yourself. Your answers should provide a 2 to 3 minute snapshot of who you are, your goals and the path that led to your goals, and why you're a great candidate for the position. Another way or phrase that's typically used around you're great for this position is fit, but fit in the right ways on substance because you bring all the competencies to the table that an employer is looking for, not cultural fit. You have to answer with resume examples. It's the evidence that supports the statements about yourself. If you're referencing your opinions about yourself, that is far less compelling than when you ground your answers in the actual things listed on your resume and then you expand. in the interview on what's listed. Your selling point should also be informed by what you know about that employer's practice areas and culture. What uniquely makes you the right fit, because what you've done requires skills that are really necessary or critical to particular areas of a particular practice or to the culture of that firm. As I mentioned, we're very entrepreneurial. White & Case has been an emerging market today, what are considered emerging markets today. We were there 60 years ago, right? So very entrepreneurial spirit that drives this firm. Leadership that says, particularly to young people, hey, you have an idea, you have contacts on the ground in this particular area of the world, go out, start a practice in that particular, an interest group in that particular region of the world. Go jump on that plane, right? So evidence of that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, that inquisitiveness, that global mindset, that willingness to do that would be valuable to us. Remember what any employer is looking for. If you've been selected for a screening interview or callback interviews, your credentials on paper likely mean that you have the technical skills and knowledge for the position. So what else is an employer seeking? The traits sought by employers, your strong work ethic and other competencies, again, as evidenced by your prior accomplishments. You know, we're not going to just take your word for it. Your maturity, your professional conduct and appearance, your likable confidence. Pleasant personality. You know, would I want to be in a conference room for 6 hours or more with this person if necessary? Because that's what's going to happen a number of times when you practice law, right? So who are you projecting yourself to be? And we can pick up so much about a person just, you know, from nonverbal cues. You communicate the minute you show up. People can feel your energy, your presence, even across the video, right? So being mindful about how you show up. I remember doing mock interviews when I was head of career services. I required all of our students to do mock interviews, to do OCI. And though there was some grumbling, ultimately people found it incredibly valuable also to have them recorded. So I was able to point out to one gentleman that his body language was terrible, you know, kind of slouching back in the chair with one leg up, et cetera. And it did not project likable confidence, it projected arrogance, right? It didn't project someone who was alert and energetic and enthusiastic. It was projecting like, you're lucky I'm here, right? And no employer is interested in that. And I said, look, you have an amazing resume. You have amazing skills, amazing opportunities, things that you've done in your career even to date. But so have a lot of other people. And as an employer is making really hard choices about who to choose between, these sorts of things about personality and how you show up will matter. And then, you know, giving articulate and thoughtful answers. And a very good way to do that is to have done the preparation, to not only know the employer and be able to specifically pitch to that employer based on who they are, but that resume assessment, knowing your resume inside and out, and that self-assessment all lends to that toolbox of things to draw from in giving very articulate and thoughtful answers. So in thinking about what any employer is looking for, remember your entire interview must answer the employer's question, can this person strongly represent our organization? So the goals of your responses, you have to convince the employer that your qualities and skills match the needs and culture of the organization. Sell yourself, show how you can positively contribute to the organization. Project likable confidence. The employer is absolutely choosing you, but you're also choosing the employer. So being that kind of informed consumer of this good, you know, the employer that you're going to choose to start your career, this resource you're going to choose, it is a give and take. So getting that balance right matters, and it's why I think recording yourself and definitely doing mock interviews, getting feedback on how you're coming off is really, really helpful. The goals of your responses, superior energy, enthusiasm, and engagement. Smile throughout. My litmus test when I was doing OCI interviews and what I would tell my students, if you have a day full of these, callbacks, whatever it is, you know, does your face hurt by the end of the day from smiling so much? But of course, you're projecting kind of educated enthusiasm, not totally over-caffeinated. So getting the balance right again is critical. One last point that I think some folks really mess up on unintentionally. It's just a silly mistake. All your answers to any question, anything that you talk about on your resume, et cetera, positive, positive, positive. Do not make any sort of negative comment about your school attended, your activities, or your previous employers. The minute you do that, the employer immediately jumps ahead and projects and thinks, well, what if they don't like it here? Or what if they don't like me? Am I going to be the thing they're talking about out in the marketplace, where your professional brand as an organization and as a professional individually is so important? It just creates it's a ding against you that is just not necessary. And so that is the end of my presentation. I don't know if there are questions in the chat or that anyone wants to make me aware of. I'm happy to answer questions. One question I see, do you have any recommendations for building contacts in this COVID world? Absolutely. I think the same resources, the same avenues you would follow if we were not dealing with these circumstances apply here. To my earlier point about who are the alumni, alumni of your school who went to that particular employer or are at that particular employer, reaching out, hey, I would love to have just a 5-10 minute Zoom chat with you if you don't mind. Any ways of reaching out and connecting, doing it virtually, doing it by phone. What we're finding at the firm is that we're getting greater levels of engagement actually from our employees in terms of showing up for videos. When we've done virtual events for schools, we're getting far more participants doing things virtually, because people, now that they are working flexibly, working from home, they are better able to make the time. Whereas before, you've cut out the element of commuting, you've cut out the element of certain things that were a distraction from being able to do more, attend things, make yourself available. People are working harder, I find, but they do have more time. So definitely pursue what you normally would. It's just not going to be face-to-face, and that's fine. And ask the person their preference. Would you prefer that it's just a phone call? Do you mind video? I imagine you're zoomed out. Just give them the option. I think that would be appreciated. I see a question. What are the common mistakes you see on video interviews? Not looking at the camera. I do this constantly because I'm just freaked out by my own image and weirdly fascinated. So if I have a screen up, I tend to look at me as opposed to the camera. So one trick I do with that, and I'm doing it now, is to put the image of me as close to the camera I'm looking at as possible. Because it is hard to talk into, feel like you're talking into a void. If you're trying to look at the other person and look at the camera. So spending the time to get the camera right matters. I think in video interviews, I'm thinking of two formats, right? If I just talk about the video application format that we're asking people to use for our White and Case interviews in the coming season, I think not treating it like a real interview and being so kind of hung up on, let me get the exact answer right. Let me phrase this in the exact way or just getting too hung up on the format. As much as you can simulate an actual interview, you know, the stimulation of there's someone apart from me, someone opposite me. That someone happens to be a camera, but I'm going to pretend that it is an actual person. And when I read the question asked, I'm going to stop. I'm going to think about what I want my answer to be. And then the platform will say, okay, when you're ready, I think it gives you about 90 seconds to say you're ready. If you're ready sooner, you can start recording right away. Or when you're ready, just record. Pretend as much as possible it's like a real interview. And don't get overly caught up on it being the camera. And I think not taking it seriously because it's not live, thinking you don't have to dress professionally, you don't have to care about your background environment, you can just kind of do it anywhere and it doesn't matter. Just take it really, really seriously. Those are the common mistakes I see, that people are not being aware of their presence on video and adjusting accordingly. Are there tips you have with more experienced lawyers who are engaging in video or recorded interviews that you don't see with law students? I think being more comfortable talking about your specific experiences and how they directly will help you make you the best candidate for a position. I actually think you're in a better position if you are more experienced, because there's just more for you to draw from that's top of mind. So I don't think that there are different tips necessarily for an experienced lawyer. I think you'll probably have an easier time of it if I had to guess. Any other questions? I'll wait a few more seconds. I don't see more questions, so I just want to wrap up and say that incredibly excited about new and different and expanded opportunities that are going to come about as a result of the flexibility of video interviews and particularly video applications. I can't say enough about how excited I am. I strongly, strongly encourage you to use White & Case's platform, even to practice, right? To get more comfortable with this medium, because I think it's the wave of the future. We've actually had a lot of experience in this space because White & Case, our second largest office, is our London office. And for vacation schemes and other opportunities, it's all application by video. So we're very used to assessing candidates by video. So it didn't seem that much of a cultural shock for us to implement video interviews in the US. I think it's more of a cultural shock for the US law schools and for folks who are not used to it. So just explaining it, making the case for it is really important. And I think just getting around some of the limitations on how many people can be seen in the typical OCI format and seriously considered. Of course, we look at resume drops, we look at applications that come directly, but there's nothing like being able to present yourself visually in addition to your written application. And so I'm really, really excited. I see it as an opportunity for greater access to the profession and to varied employers. And so it's nothing to be intimidated about. I'm really excited about it. It's a big part of why White & Case was really quite happy to be part of the Belonging Project. And we're proud to be a national partner with Safeguard. Very, very concerned. We're all very concerned as a profession, each of us in the law firm space, on the client side, about there being a retrenchment on any progress that has been made on diversity based on what we saw in the economic downturn of a number of years ago. And so just being vigilant about that, I think is so important, and it's such a wonderful opportunity. And we're so grateful to Corey Carew for putting this together, for allowing firms to come together and work together to provide a support network, along with a lot of other national partners, the LGBT Bar, NALP, et cetera, to provide a supportive network for students and for experienced lawyers, so that they have resources, they have avenues of support. I love the idea of us coming together to support this effort. And the concept of belonging, particularly for me and at White & Case, it is truly one of the strongest objectives that we're focused on this year, moving the conversation beyond diversity and inclusion. You know, as Renee Myers, fantastic diversity consultant and expert, always says, diversity is being invited and inclusion is being asked to dance. Belonging is that next step, that no one has to invite you, that you want to just get out. You know that you can get out on the dance floor, be yourself, and do your thing without an invitation because you feel a sense of belonging. So I just love the concept of the Belonging Project, moving the conversation on diversity and inclusion forward in a more powerful way. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And when I was asked, you know, what do I want to contribute? What do I want to speak about? I immediately thought about law students. Yes, I have worked in the space, and so I'm partial, but I think law students are the future. They're the future of our, not just our profession, but of society, because the law undergirds everything we do and everything we are as a civilization. So I'm always thrilled to support those who are entering the profession to do the important work that they're going to do in so many different ways. And my particular passion is around career development and what some might deem, you know, the soft skills, which are not soft. They are important. They are what differentiates you. They are what opens doors. They are the ways that future clients will be able to connect to you and feel a sense that they are heard and understood, and that you're bringing something to the table that's more than just your legal skills. It's who you are, your integrity, who you are as a person, what matters to you, and what about you, and what about those things you're bringing to what you do for a living. So please take the interview seriously. Please take advantage of the opportunities offered, the silver linings in these really difficult times of COVID. We are going to make it through, and there's going to be new innovation, new opportunity that comes out of these circumstances. So do not be afraid, embrace it. Please feel free to be in touch with me for any questions that you didn't get to answer today, that you didn't get to ask today or didn't get answered for you today. My information, Maya Hazel, it's on our website at whitecase.com. And thank you so much.